try to do 3 more on this podcast. We are going to follow the rule of continuing at the top. So we'll start with being kind, then avoid racing to the end and immersing yourself in the now. This one, well, both of these might be somewhat surprising, what I actually have to say about these, because it might be a bit unexpected, but we'll see. And then after we do that, I want to jump to the bottom and talk about this discomfort, choosing discomfort and not letting life choose it for you. So that's our plan. Let's see how well we can stick to this plan. All right. So being kind. I think that so the word here is quite intentional. And I'm not saying to be nice or to be polite. Because I think that I don't know that those two things are necessarily helpful. But I think that this channel, for example, is our attempt at being kind. And what I mean by that, and this is what I think true kindness really is, which again might be a bit unusual in that it may be something different than what you're expecting. I think true kindness is approaching people with kind of an open heart, in that your goal is to foster goodwill and authentically try to help people, as well as helping yourself. But that will often require that you say hard truths. But oftentimes I think it's the hard truths that end up helping people the most. And therefore, the things that you share with people, it may have the appearance of being not nice or not polite. But in fact, if you are fostering goodwill and you are actually trying to help people in an authentic way, sharing with them things that can help them grow is one of the kindest things I think you can do, especially in the world that we live in today, where such feedback, such intentionally helpful feedback, is considered highly taboo. Now, I understand that you don't want to necessarily take the view that you're walking around and asking every random person to give you feedback, hoping that they'll be kind, because lots of people, I think, will offer up feedback, and they're not necessarily qualified to give you this feedback. So there's another one in here. Be mindful of who you pick as a mentor. Maybe seek out multiple mentors, but this is other one of choose your inner circle wisely. So this is the point of essentially ensuring that people that are in your inner circle actually deserve to be there. And if you follow this advice, at least what I've found is that if you are very intentional about your inner circle, and so the people that you surround yourself with are people that really want to elevate you, and you want to elevate them, and you trust them, and they can see you and all of your flaws, and you are receptive to this kind of feedback to help you grow, then those people, more likely than not, you can probably you should, in theory, be able to trust their feedback to help you grow. And therefore, their kindness of being honest with you. And again, this takes an incredible amount of intellectual honesty, emotional honesty to receive feedback that is constructive without taking a defensive posture on it. And so the idea is that if you can guide yourself down this path, have this kind of approach for the feedback that you give, the things that you're helping people understand. Like maybe a simple one is you have a friend that when you sit down for a meal or something, or let's make it even easier. You have a friend that they come over and they don't take their shoes off when they sit on the couch, and they bring sort of their dirty shoes onto the couch. A lot of people may be afraid to give that friend feedback and say, hey, the shoes on the couch is maybe not the best thing. But I think many of us can look at that and say, yeah, I mean, even if you allow shoes in the house, maybe on the couch is going too far. But how many of us actually spend time sharing that for fear of blowback or something of that nature? I think that many of us might, but I think, again, if you move forward under this premise of I'm fostering goodwill, and I surround myself with people that also foster goodwill. So I give them feedback. And in this case, this is, I think, the epitome of kindness. Because how many other couches or environments is your friend going to where they're not being mindful of these situations and, potentially burning bridges with others? Because no one has the courage and the kindness to tell them what is really going on. And so now, likewise, if you are in the position to receive that feedback, like you are the person that's wearing your shoes and you're on the couch, if you get that feedback and you have an open heart and you're fostering goodwill and people are helping you and you're seeing that kindness is helping you, the idea then is, shouldn't you reciprocate this? Then when it comes to things that they're doing wrong, maybe they talk with their mouth full at meals, or maybe they don't use napkins. They wipe their mouth with their shirt or something. I don't know. I'm reaching here, but I'm trying to find something that's like sort of really obvious bad etiquette or manners. And what's crazy is I suspect that each of these examples may seem a little out there, but all of us probably know, especially those of us that are like in our 30s or later, we've got the friend that's doing these things, that they talk with their mouth full, they belch or something in public and think it's kind of cute or funny. They hop on your couch with their shoes on. They just do poor etiquette things. And what's crazy about it, at least from what I've seen, is, and I've been doing this for quite some time, and part of it is these are things that I learned in PhD school, because I had advisors that were really, I think, trying to be kind, and they really wanted to help me. And so they gave me guidance that essentially opened me up to this world that I was missing. Many of the things that I didn't understand. For example, one of their pieces of feedback for me when I was giving talks is I was talking too fast. And there's many reasons why I was talking too fast. But as most of the people that work with me know, sometimes when I get kind of in the groove, or I'm trying to articulate a point, and maybe you've even seen this on this podcast, is sometimes the cadence in which I speak will accelerate. I'll start talking really fast. And I'm not necessarily trying to talk this fast. I just get kind of like hyper excited to make my point. The problem with that, though, and again, if you get feedback from people that really care, is oftentimes talking really fast just confuses people. It also doesn't give people time to contemplate what you're saying. On top of that, whether people realize it or not, there tends to be sort of this knee-jerk reaction to people that talk really fast, in that they are trying to con you. They're the fast-talking used car salesperson. And the truth is, I've known some people that have done this, even in technology and programming, is they'll try to talk so fast that somehow they think that they are confusing everyone else by the speed at which they're talking. But at least for people like me and my advisors and other people that I know that are like super intellectuals, more than anything, it makes me believe, and these other folks that I know believe, that this person is actually so sort of insecure that they can't speak with a deliberate cadence to where each of their words can be scrutinized. And I'm of the mindset that you should be saying things that are so important or so valuable that every word actually can and maybe should be scrutinized. It's not a race to confuse people. The goal is to, at least my form of communication, the goal is to help people understand, to share knowledge. And I don't know how you can do this when you speak really fast. So the feedback I got from my advisors was, you need to slow way down when you give these presentations. And that, yes, you can talk really fast, like many intelligent people, but when you're surrounded by hyper intelligent people, they can all talk fast. The goal is not to talk so fast that no one can understand you, because frankly, most of the people that are hyper intelligent likely can, and they are feeling, at least in my circles, feeling annoyed that you aren't better about choosing your words, so you're saying more with less. That's what I think we should be striving for. So my advisors gave me this feedback, and it was some of the best feedback I've ever received in my life. Now, at this point, I had given dozens, maybe hundreds of talks. I mean, I was already teaching undergraduate computer science at industry and academia. And this whole time I've been moving at a pace that's just too fast. But I finally now had advisors that actually really cared about me, that were being kind and giving me much needed feedback. And because I was trying to be very receptive to this, at first I was a little confused. Like, oh, I thought talking fast was the sign of intelligence. And again, I had maybe mentors before Manish and Jeremy that weren't necessarily good mentors. Again, the inner circle, choosing it wisely. But now I had advisors that both Jeremy and Manish are brilliant guys. These professors are legendary, and they would speak at a controlled cadence to help me and their other students understand. I would see moments like when they're talking with each other where sometimes their cadence would accelerate because they were getting like annoyed or they're trying to get a point across. And I could see that, yeah, these guys can talk extremely fast. They're mostly just not doing it because they're trying to show respect for other people. And they're not trying to speak at such a rate that no one understands what they're doing, what they're saying, what they're thinking. So the higher order bit here is this feedback that I received, and this is one of dozens, maybe hundreds of pieces of feedback that I received when I was in grad school. This was one of the kindest things that I think could have ever been done for me, because it entirely changed the way that I communicate. And up until this point in my life, no one had shared this with me. And suddenly the things that I was sharing, my research, my ideas, they were starting to become understood by a much larger audience, that I was going slow enough to not confuse everyone, not lose everyone. And then on top of that, one of the things that I noticed is when I was speaking so fast before, whether people admit this or not, it can be overwhelming. It can really be exhausting for audiences when you speak so quickly that you're sort of killing people's brains. Now, again, it's not to say that there aren't certain environments that you may need to speak quickly in. Alternatively, better word choices, also another route. But this really helped me. This really changed my life in what I think was and is an extremely positive way. And I'm super grateful that my advisors were kind enough to take the time and teach me this piece of wisdom that now I've carried things forward. And I'm able to communicate in a much clearer way. So this is the summary maybe of this first piece, in that I think there's a confusion about kindness, that kindness means to empathize with people. And I'm not saying that it doesn't. I think empathizing with people oftentimes is a sign of kindness. But I think kindness can also mean sharing with people in a very non-judgmental way things that they may be doing wrong that are clearly sort of like objectively understood to be wrong, and helping people grow. And I think that one of the reasons why this is maybe some of the kindest things that you can do is you have to kind of like put yourself out there. You have to risk potentially hurting their feelings or them having a reaction that is going to create tension. And so on top of that, it's likely going to require you to be even more empathetic, to understand how to relay this information in a way that is not offensive, that demonstrates that you are really trying to be a good actor here, not a bad actor, and kind of leverages the friendship or the relationship that you have with the person in a way that fosters trust. But again, it's something that I think is kind because there's so much thought and effort that goes into this. And principally, all of that thought and effort is rooted just in helping them. you're not doing this necessarily to help yourself. You're doing it to help someone else, and thus the kindness. I mean, certainly if the friend is the one that's coming over and putting their, dirty shoes on your couch, maybe this is also indirectly helping you or directly helping you. But if the goal is just to make the person a better person, these are like secondary and tertiary effects. The primary goal of this is to help your friend or your mentee or whoever, your boss, any of these things, help them become a better person. And that I really do think is one of the highest forms of kindness. And it's not niceness and it's not politeness. It's, in fact, many cases, it's the opposite of those two things. But this is one of the ways that I mentor. And at first, I think people that I mentor, it can feel a little jarring because I may be the first person that's ever given them honest and what I feel like is kind feedback and telling them things that maybe they don't necessarily want to hear, that others have sort of skirted out of sharing because they don't want to risk the damage or the conflict or putting themselves out there, right? You really are opening yourself up to a world of hurt. But in some ways, it's really unfair, I think, to the person to not share these things with them, especially if they're like fairly objective, like the ones that we spoke about. It's like, when is it ever necessarily great to have your dirty shoes on someone's couch? Like, I can't think of a case where you would like maybe want someone to do that. Maybe the case exists, but the point is, like, if we're just being intellectually and emotionally honest here for a moment, I think we can all kind of agree that there are certain things that is just like good behavior. Like if you visit your friend's house and you stay with them for a week or two, when you're leaving the house, you just like don't steal their towels and their toilet paper and all that stuff. Like, and sadly, I think we might know the people that do this. I've known some people in my life. They're not around anymore, but that would do kind of things like this. And it's just kind of like bad behavior. I think we all know that's like, it's just bad behavior. Just don't do this. There's got to be, like, we can hold ourselves accountable to things that are obviously not great. But what I often find is that some of these things, because no one has told them and they've been doing these things for so long, they don't know. They actually don't know that it's bad behavior. I've worked with, I don't know, maybe hundreds of people at this point that I've mentored over the last 25 years. And some of the feedback that I would give them, they would, for those people that are being introspective and understand my intentions are wholesome, they would really be grateful that I would give them feedback. In fact, with Taylor, one of the things I absolutely love with Taylor is I usually give him feedback after any meeting that we have because we're grooming him to be a very high level executive at Merly. But there's things that he sort of needs to learn. And so with T now, T goes out of his way each time we finish one of these meetings. He reaches out to me and is like, okay, I'm ready for the feedback. Like, I want to know, like, what did I do this time? What can I improve upon? I'm really excited and it's fantastic. I think it's like exactly what I look for with people that have growth mindset is once you start to build in trust and they know that your intentions are just to help them, especially for people that really have a growth mindset, I think they can be very receptive to these things and in some sense be like deprived of it. That I think T in particular was really hoping for a long time to have a mentor that would actually be able to mentor him and give him kind but fair feedback. And so I think that the results of this can be surprising. That once you create a safe space for people and they understand that your goal is not to hurt them, but instead strengthen the relationship that you have with them and they have with others, I think that this can be pretty effective. Okay. I, I think I probably said enough about that one for now. So the next one, avoid racing to the end, immerse yourself in the now. This one is, just to be clear, this one's a little tough in that, especially kind of in the startup world and doing research and just things with deadlines, right? It's the real world, we have to get things done. And so this idea that we can move slowly is like a luxury in some sense. And so I'm not talking about that. I'm not saying don't move with urgency. I think we should. And I think that that's a great way to live. And just to be clear, I'm talking about moving with urgency, not panic. Urgency, in my mind, is the philosophy that you are working towards something and you're prioritizing that this thing needs to be done. That you have a limited amount of time, and so you need to make sure that we finish all the steps to complete this task. That's the way I kind of think about urgency. Panic is what happens when someone screams out fire in a movie theater and everyone together runs toward the exit. And this is really not good. This is really bad because when people panic, it often creates more problems than less problems. So this is why I think when you have the fire alarm, people will say, move toward your nearest exit in an orderly fashion. Do not run. The reason why they don't want you to run, as I understand it, is if you run and collide with someone, specifically at the bottleneck, which is the exit, you then start to create more congestion as more and more people pile up. And now no one gets out because there's this, it was a bottleneck before, but you could get through it. Now it's a bottleneck that's basically like, it's a deadlock. There's no forward progress. Whereas if you would have moved in an orderly fashion, maybe not everybody gets out, but maybe 90% of the people get out because you don't create this, you don't exacerbate a situation that's already intense and already under this time window. So moving with urgency is important. Moving with panic is generally a bad idea. Okay, so in this case, what I'm talking about is avoid racing to the end, immerse yourself now. So I'm basically saying, how can we move with urgency to where we're trying to get things done, but yet we're not so focused on the end. Instead, we're focused on what it is we're doing. And why is this beneficial? What I often find is that in many cases, especially for people that are well prepared, they're willing to make sacrifices to do things the right way. And people that are not willing to make sacrifices, and sacrifices might be dinner with your friends, it might be watching Netflix, it might be your sport events, it might be a variety of other things. Like life is unfair, and life is unfortunately going to be a lot about sacrifices and choosing what you will give up in order to be successful or do incredible things. And so if you allocate enough time for a task, what I often find is you can move with urgency, but you can be disciplined enough to where, as you're going through the process, that urgency does not become panic, and you can live in the now. And when you live in the now, what I often find is you grow significantly more, because the tiny details that you likely would bulldoze over if you're just racing to the end are things that you would actually notice, you would pay attention to, you would learn from. And now, not only are you completing the task, you've grown. But it takes a very particular and intentional mindset, because when you're just trying to get something finished, you oftentimes are so focused on the outcome that you lose appreciation for the process that you're following to get that outcome. And when you do that, you likely lose the ability to contemplate, is the process I'm following actually the most effective? I don't have time for that now. I just need to get this done. But if you follow that mentality every single time you do something, you likely are never going to grow. So it's a vicious cycle. But instead, if you allocate yourself potentially more time, you go into things thinking, okay, this is going to take me until tomorrow, but rather than trying to race to the end in an hour, I'm going to give myself a 3-hour window. I'm going to give myself 3 times the amount of time I think I actually need, because I want to go slow and I want to make sure that I do this right. The byproduct of that could be, and again, this is contextual, right? So it really depends. Maybe you're already super optimal in this particular thing and you can just crank it out and you don't need a change. But maybe it's something that you haven't spent that much time on and you're suboptimal. And so now as you're solving it, you can reevaluate and try to assess, like, are there improvements I can make to do this better? One example of this, at least for me, is I type in Dvorak. I don't type in QWERTY. Well, that's not true. I do still type in QWERTY a little bit, but I think it was when I was 25 or so, I realized that I'd probably be typing quite a bit. And one of my friends introduced me to Dvorak, and his argument at the time is, if you learn this, you probably be able to type faster. And I did some research, and again, while it potentially is an open debate on whether or not Dvorak actually makes you faster as a typist, although I think that at least the data I've seen, that's fairly substantiated. And even for my anecdotal data, when I was typing in QWERTY to Dvorak, it's a massive difference. But even if that actually isn't fully substantiatable, if that's a word, fully demonstrable, there is evidence that it has a direct impact on reducing carpal tunnel because of the way that it separates out the use of your left and right hand. It's much more of a back and forth, whereas QWERTY is largely left hand dominant, which again is somewhat amusing, at least for me, because I'm left-handed. So the people you would expect, I think, to switch out of QWERTY, the least would be the lefties, because we're already, this is our dominant hand, and we probably are pretty fast with this. So me switching out to Dvorak over QWERTY is probably strange, but the results that I've seen are the twofold. And I actually ran tests that I was typing in QWERTY before I transitioned and started learning Dvorak, and I think I was around 70 words a minute, but my error was really not great. It was like 20, 25%. And then I learned Dvorak, and keep in mind, it took time. It probably took me 6 months to do this. I worked on it, I chipped away at it at night. But again, I'm thinking about the long game here. I'm not racing to the end. I'm immersing myself in the now. I'm basically trying to figure out if I put in the time on this and I stay disciplined for this task, maybe this work is going to make, I'm going to have massive return on investment. That was my thought process. And on top of that, I follow this growth mindset philosophy where I'm constantly trying to do things that will just make me better. So I spent about 6 months learning on the weekends and a little bit at night. And then finally, I thought that I was trained well enough to start doing it for work. And that was really painful because I forgot about little things like learning the symbol keys, which, of course, if you program, you're using the symbol keys quite a bit. And a lot of it is the same, but there's a few cases where they swap things in an unusual way, and those cases kind of rocked me. So there was probably more of a hiccup than there needed to be if I would have thought this through a little bit more. But eventually I figured those things out. And now the speed at which I type, I test myself, ever so often. And without trying, I can usually get about 100 words a minute. And my error is like less than 5%. If I'm really trying and I'm actually like really concentrating, I've been able to break 120, maybe 125 words a minute, and I can bring my error rate down to about 1%. Now, again, I'm just trying to be clear. This takes significant concentration. I'm not just casually typing. If I'm casually typing, I'm about 100 words a minute, and probably around 5% error. But if you compare this to QWERTY, when I was at 70 words a minute and my error was maybe 20%, this is a notable difference. And the kicker is that this is something that compounds daily, because I type every day. Every day I'm getting a return on this investment. Every single day I'm able to send emails faster, messages on Slack faster, even writing code faster. And I think some people might argue, oh, well, with auto completion and stuff. Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think that there are some downsides of using auto completion because you may stop learning how to think. But even with that in place, I think you're still typing the small amount of the word faster. And oftentimes, at least for emails and Slack messages, I think that those might require some nuance. So the higher order bit with this is that if I were racing to the end, if I wasn't immersing myself in the now, if I wasn't like asking myself questions, what could I do to make myself better? Are there things I can do that will optimize myself? I likely never would have done Dvorak. I likely never would have went to grad school. I also likely never would have created 2 companies, because both of those companies were really challenging the race to the end, especially the Merly, is that I was on the path to an end really quickly. In fact, maybe I've reached the end and then just decided I'm not going to be at the end. But my personal view is that when you make this shift, it's not just that you grow significantly more. I think that it's also that life itself changes. that you start to see, I don't know, you see beauty in the small things. I think you will often have a deeper appreciation for people or your family or your friends or your animals or the small stuff. It like gives you time to smell the roses. And even if you elide away the optimization part of by going slow, you can optimize and make yourself better because you're immersing yourself in the now. Even if you elide that way and you just focus on the aspects of what does this do for your personal life, that rather than running the marathon purely for completing the 26.2 miles so you can tell people I ran a marathon, but instead go run the marathon to enjoy the process of running a marathon, I think it changes things. At least it does for me, is that no longer do things feel so hard because I'm not asking myself, are you done yet? Am I done yet? Why is this taking so long? And again, I think to do this properly, you tend to need to sacrifice because you will often need a little bit more time, at least initially. But then what I found is when you give yourself that extra time, you're often faster in subsequent versions. It's very similar to what I'm doing, T and I are doing with these podcasts, is what you may not be aware of, maybe some of you are, is we're iteratively refining the recording process almost every night. And so while I'm only able to do maybe one podcast a night, which is less than what I'd like to do, I'd like to do multiple hours. Instead, I'm spending lots of time every night refining the process, trying to find better mic situations, working on new cameras, getting this new setup where I've got this snake cable to have the camera and these other light sources. And the reason why I'm spending time doing this is I'm not focused so much on just getting the podcast done. Instead, what I'm focusing on is trying to make the whole process better. And it is requiring sacrifice, like less sleep, less time on other things that I like. One of the things I'm sacrificing right now, it's just maybe a little not helpful, is this exercise thing. I really should be exercising more, but right now it's sort of this new process and I really want to iterate on it to get it solid. And I know that as I do these new things, it tends to require a little bit more time. And so I'm willing to pay the penalty now, go a little bit slower, sacrifice some of the other things, because my experience has been once we harden the process, once I start to get comfortable with all the things that I need to get comfortable with, this whole process is going to be significantly faster. And the long-term benefits are going to be, uncountable, or it's going to be hours upon hours, days, weeks, months of time saved purely because I spent a little extra time immersing myself in the now and resisting the urge to race to the end. Yeah. Okay. Now I wanted to talk about the discomfort, but I think now that I mentioned the exercise, I think I'm going to follow my own advice and do a small amount of exercise tonight with the dog, maybe a little weightlifting or something. So I'm going to wrap this up now, and maybe tomorrow we get into the discomfort one.